Hi, Eric Gibaud, ericgibaud.com, and today I'm going to speak about something that many people ask me. Leica M11, 8800 euros. Hasselblad X2D that just came out, 8700 euros. Sony Alpha 1, 7300 euros. Similar in dollars, okay? Nikon Z9, 6000 euros. Canon R3, 6000 euros. Fujifilm JFX 100S, 6000 euros. We just speak about bodies, not even lenses. How can they justify these prices? Who are these cameras for? What do they do with them? Etc, etc. So we're going to speak about this. Let's start. I just had oxygen after reading this. Well, that's not finished. I hope you're okay. So let's go for it. Hasselblad H6D, 35,000 euros, more or less the same in dollars for the body. Phase 1 XT, $56,000 or euros, more or less. Okay, so without lenses, who buys this? Are they all professional? What do they do with that? What is it for? What else? So we're going to look at this in details. So let's carry on. If you have not done it yet, I invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. The small button down here, also a small bell. If you click on the bell, you get notified when I upload a new video. Thank you so much. First, I think we should split two parts, the professional and the amateur photographer. Okay? Very often people think this is just for professional, and that's not exactly right. There are many amateur photographers that have that kind of cameras, and very often people say Leica is a camera for doctors or for people with a big company or lots of money. Obviously you need the money to buy this, but this is not a fair image to give to these people, because not every Leica or Hasselblad user, and other brand also, are necessarily rich people. Sometimes they simply get the budget out of something else. They prefer to have a normal old car and spend the money on a good camera or a pricey camera, or they don't have a specific clothes that is expensive, and they simply prefer to spend the money on a camera that is expensive for many. So it's not fair to always see someone with a Leica or Hasselblad or other expensive cameras as a rich person. Maybe it's people that has a financial organization that is different from others. Okay, so it's completely respectable. Now let's look at the professional. Why do they get this camera, and how do they justify this investment? Because for them is they need a return on investment. And something we must not forget when we want to justify this kind of purchase or investment, depends on what you are, pro, amateur, it doesn't matter, is before you would spend a lot of money on a really top quality or high price gear. You would buy the body, several lenses, and that was for your whole life. Many people bought a Hasselblad 500 and they used it their whole professional life, or whole life, that's it, or amateur life, they used it forever. Or a Leica M3, M4, M6, M7. Well, M7 started to be more complicated, but from the second they started to put electronic, like in the M7, well, that started to be a problem. Like you have the Mamiya, the 67B that is fully mechanical, and the 67Z that has electronic. The one with electronic, when they fail, that's finished, that's over. Okay, so it's hard to repair or to get another one to fix it together, but it's complicated. So it means that that started to be a problem. And nowadays with digital, it's even worse. Why? Because now, even if you want this camera forever, that's probably impossible. This camera is not going to last 30 years, maybe 5, maybe 10, maybe 15, but not 30, 40 years or 50 years or more. So it means when you're going to try to justify this purchase, you must take this into account, that this camera is not the camera you will have the rest of your life, maybe on the shelf, but not working. So this is important when you're going to make your math, okay, to justify something like this. Then I think we should split two kind of clients, okay? One is the more than two kind of clients, two kind of cameras. The one that are really high features, or quick cameras, or really fast autofocus, or really face detection, animal detection, all this, and really quick burst rate when they make pictures, all this. So people who look for that kind of really fast and reliable cameras, and other who are looking for high image quality. Image quality and photo quality is not the same, okay? Image quality is what the camera is making. Photographic quality is what the photographer is making. So we speak about image quality. And you realize that not exactly the same camera. Very often, really top camera that are really fast, really reliable, they not necessarily have a better image quality than camera that's a lot slower, okay? So, but they need the picture to be made at the right second with a perfect autofocus, all this, so this is the top priority. And then when you look at cameras like Hasselblad or Phase 1, where the top priority is actually on image quality, they are normally slow, heavy, not that practical to use, not many frames per second, all this, but the priority is then the image quality. So there are two groups in this, and depending on what you need, you will look at one or the other, okay? Obviously, a top camera, fast camera doesn't have normally a bad image quality, okay? But the aim is not the same, okay? And then there is one thing that is really important. This is common to amateur and professional, because very often people think that when we speak about pleasure of using a camera, it's just for amateur. The professional would use any tool. Yeah, he could use any tool, but probably he wants to feel happy when he uses gear, the pleasure of using his gear, and this is common to amateur and professional. And it's the same thing as a taxi driver. He could have a Dacia car, or he could have a Mercedes-Benz or a BMW. Both are cars. He will probably charge the same thing to go somewhere for his client, but he's going to spend like 10-12 hours a day in this car, in his taxi. So obviously the pleasure is not the same. And also what he offers to his client, it's not the same thing to have someone step into a Dacia than in a Mercedes with really comfortable seats. They both are cars. They probably charge the same thing, but the pleasure is not the same. So this pleasure is not something you can actually value is in money-wise, okay? But very often this justifies that someone spends so much money just because he has the pleasure of using a gear, okay? I think we need to set aside Leica M, M11, and M in general. Why? Because despite the price, very often these are not professionals that use them. Why? Because they are not reliable camera. I speak in the way that the fact that it's fully manual makes that for many it's complicated. I've made many wedding reportage with Leica M8. To give you an idea, as you have a rangefinder, you actually see one size in one eye, and then you have the other eye that is open, it's a different size. When I finished a wedding during 1 hour and a half, 2 hours, I would see different sizes from one eye and the other. It took me like, yeah, a couple of hours to recover after many hours of working, obviously. So this is not exactly the perfect tool for that. So obviously some professionals do use Leica M for that, for wedding, but also for reportage or sometimes landscape or street photography, yes. But very often it's not as intense. Before, when you were doing with reportage with films, yes, because you were not going to give 1,000 pictures to your clients. But nowadays, many clients ask a massive quantity of pictures, so it's really tiring to work with that. So this is why very often you see more amateur with the Leica M than professional, okay? Professional want Leica, they will probably get another range of camera by Leica, SL or things like this, okay? But that was special side parenthesis about the Leica M, okay? So for many it's pure pleasure more than a professional investment, okay? Then it's important to decide what is this camera for, what kind of picture, what kind of situation, because this will decide what is the best gear. When you're going to spend so much money, what is the best? Well, the thing is, you realize that even professional, very often it's really hard to justify it on this side. You need the top image quality, yeah, but most of the time most people will not see the difference. Once it's printed, once it's published, most clients won't see the difference, although you spend all that money. So very often it's really hard to justify it on this better quality, okay? And if you look at features like faster burst rate, frame per second, or faster anything, autofocus, all this, very often, well, it's not justifiable. You cannot justify either, because there are really a few photographers that really need the top features like this, and very often it's just sometimes, not all the time, and they realize that they could do the same thing with cheaper gear or older gear, and actually it's more comfort for them. Yes, it is, but it's not impossible to do with something else. But so when they analyze, it's also hard to justify to buy this, to get really these really expensive cameras, and very often the result or the commodity is not that much difference to justify this massive price difference, okay? And then it's important to know what support you're going to use to publish your picture. Social networks, printed, the size of the building, or whatever, TV or website or whatever, okay? So it's really important to know that, because the choice of the gear is important. If you're going to spend a lot of money, extra money for image quality, and it will end up just on social networks, well, you probably wasting your money, because all this extra money you spent is probably not visible. And even when you print, unless you print on really high quality, most of your clients will not see any difference. So you wasting a lot of money. So it is really hard to justify extra image quality if the support, the final art, I would say the final support, is not high quality also, okay? But if your idea is to catch a duck that is flying and actually winks at you, yeah, you probably need a really good burst rate, frame per second, to get the right picture, the right second. And doesn't matter what support you're going to use, you need the picture. If you don't get the picture, there's nothing to print, nothing to show, nothing. So it justifies more the performance of the camera more than the image quality. So depending on what you're going to do, you will probably like one situation, one type of gear than another one, okay? But it is important to take this into account. And then we should not forget about one important point: who is going to pay for this gear? Most people will think, well, the guy who has the camera is paying for it, no? Well, not always. When you look at really expensive cameras, very often they are rented cameras. If tomorrow Vogue magazine wants to have such or such photographer to come and make a photo shoot, it will say, well, I charge so much for my work, but then I need this camera, this lighting, this, and you have to rent it from this place or any place you want. And the Vogue magazine will pay him for his work and will rent the gear he needs to do the work, okay? So very often you see people with a camera that costs maybe 50,000 euros with lenses, all this, but that's not his gear. This gear is rented, okay? It can also happen with a really fast Nikon Z9 or Sony Alpha 1. You can actually rent it for 1 day, 2 days for just the work, okay? So don't get dazzled with these people. Sometimes show off with the really big cameras or expensive cameras, not necessarily big, but very often they're not their cameras, although most of us actually buy the gear we need, okay? But buying a camera that costs 35,000 euros and lenses, all this is completely logical for a company that rents them out. Why? Because if you buy a camera that costs 50,000 euros and you let it like something like 100 days per year at 1,000 or 2,000 euros per day, that makes a lot of financial sense, okay? So don't get mixed up. Not every photographer is paying for what they are actually using, okay? Sometimes, and very often, someone else is paying, or when you go to a studio, they can also let you some gear and you pay for it, but they've bought it to make business with it, okay? So the big question is it worth the money? Well, the big question is, if you speak about pleasure, then there's nothing to justify. that's no point. I mean, you like it, you love it, you can afford it, you enjoy it, do it. That's it. Nothing to justify, okay? If we speak about someone who has to justify the quality or the way it works, how fast, how good, all this, then this is a really different story, okay? Really different story. Most of the time, if we look at image quality, it's hard to justify because most people will not see the difference, so it's hard to justify. But when we look at performance, very often it's also hard to justify because actually you realize that most of what this camera are doing, you can do it with any camera. Maybe not as secure, maybe not as confident about the result. Maybe you need to make 10 pictures to make sure that 1 or 2 are fine, but still you can still make them. So it's really hard to justify. So actually, what are you paying for? Well, I think most people who pay that, they pay for pleasure of using this kind of gear. Also tranquility, know that when you click, the picture is there. There is no autofocus failure, whatever. If you look at manual cameras like Leica M, then you speak purely about pleasure, not about anything else. Well, image quality is good also, obviously, but I think it's really hard to justify using this camera other than pleasure and tranquility. Okay, you know that the autofocus is fast, or burst rate, or the image quality. If you wanted to really print a massive, high quality file, you would get it. Okay, but yeah, it's hard to justify, honestly. We should not forget also it's about the image you give to your client. I speak about yourself, not about the pictures, okay? Is that there are some clients, they really evaluate the quality of the photographer according to the gear he uses. I think this is stupid. They should look at your work. If they like it, they contract you. If they don't like it, they don't contract you. But still, this is the way it works, especially with agencies. Because agencies, they want to tell their client that their photographer is using such or such gear, such top quality camera or lenses or whatever, and they ask you to have that kind of gear. So even if it doesn't justify the cost, what they will pay you, sometimes simply if you don't have this top quality gear, basically you will not have the clients. So at the end, it ends up being justified to buy this because otherwise you would not have the clients. So that's sad. I think this is sad. They should value your work and not the gear you have, but this is the way it works. But I still think someone who can afford it and thinks he would enjoy it and need it, if he can afford it, go for it. That's good, okay? But what's really important is that if you cannot afford it, don't think that because you don't have this camera, you cannot do good pictures. I think anything you can do with these cameras, you can probably do with any cameras. Maybe you need to have more post-production work on it, maybe some better lighting, different lighting, maybe make 10 pictures instead of 1 and make sure 1 is perfectly in focus, all this, okay? So maybe it's more difficult, but you're actually buying for commodity and pleasure. So don't discourage yourself if you feel that you cannot afford that kind of cameras. Enjoy what you have. There are many great photographers that do incredible pictures with really basic cameras, because I think the weight of the photographer, I don't speak about kilos, I speak about the weight, the share of the photographer is a lot more important than the gear. So the gear is an extra, okay? But still, I think, don't discourage yourself. If you cannot afford that kind of camera, you can still do brilliant pictures, probably better than many of these people that have these top-of-the-line cameras, because the picture is more the person who makes it than the gear itself. Okay, so if you can afford it, you want to enjoy it, go for it. If you cannot afford it or you cannot justify it, no problem. Use what you can and enjoy it. Okay, so that would be my conclusion. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you feel it may interest other people, please share it on social networks. If you have not done it yet, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Small button down here and also a small bell. If you click on the bell, get notified when I upload a new video. My website, gibaud.com. If you have any question, you can leave a comment below. Also leave you links of my gear on Amazon, links of everything I reviewed by K&F Concept, Sandmark, and Flashes by Westcott, and also a link to my PayPal account in case you wanted to make a donation. Thank you very much, please take care of yourself, and see you soon. Bye!